I got this 500 horsepower B8.5 S4 from Copart with a couple of little dings. Today I'm gonna do my best to try and drive it for the first time. First I have to replace this pyro fuse here, which blows whenever you blow your airbags or get into an accident. To do that, we just undo these two 13mm nuts holding it in place. Then we disconnect this little connector here. There we go. And it should be able to come off. Now I just need to make sure that these are the same part number. They might not be. Handling is permitted only by authorized personnel. Oops, that's definitely not me. Well, we're gonna throw it in and see if it works. I actually have no idea if this is going to blow as soon as I connect this to a battery because I have not replaced my crash sensors yet, but we're gonna give it a shot. Then we can probably install our battery, which actually came with the car and was extremely dead, but I think my charger was able to bring it back to life. I'm genuinely concerned that as soon as I connect this battery, the pyro fuse is gonna blow again. I don't really know exactly what triggers them. Go for it and hope that we don't kill ourselves. Positive, connected, and then negative. The car now has power, and we didn't blow the fuse, which is great. I do not want to disconnect my AC condenser and have to refill my AC gases, which is why I need to find a way to mount this to the car so that it doesn't drag on the ground. Why won't it fit anymore? Now with that not even finger tight, I think we're good to go. Now we just need a couple of zip ties somewhere. All right, that should do it. As long as this is not going to be touching any of these pulleys here, it's good enough for me. As far as this heat exchanger for the supercharger goes, we can just unhook it because we currently have no coolant in the car anyway, and we have no supercharger belt, nothing driving the water pump either. Got a little bit of coolant in my eyes, no big deal, nothing I haven't seen before. And now I can probably maybe drive it for the first time ever. We have an issue with our steering rack, it seems, because it's really hard to steer this thing. I need to let you know that I am pretty sick, so that might explain slightly weird noises I make today and potentially just my overall energy levels and whatnot. So make sure to put on your masks and maintain your distance from the screen. I don't know. Anyway, today we're gonna start fixing things. We're also going to look for things that are broken because there's definitely some hidden damage. Unfortunately, currently I do not have enough parts to fully rebuild this car yet because we need a parts car, and I've discussed this in previous videos. I'm doing my best to find one. It's just gonna take some time. But here we have the two main things that keep this car from being drivable. And if you've seen the previous videos, you would know that our main issue besides the pyro fuse was our supercharger belt tensioner, as well as a little pulley that is broken for the accessory belt. Idler pulley, to be more precise, that just has a couple of little chips in it. And here's that supercharger belt tensioner that is completely broken. This piece right here is supposed to be there, and it's not anymore. But besides the little pulleys and the tensioner up front, we do have some mechanical damage somewhere else, at least so it appears. When I just bought this car, I did notice that it said steering defective, do not drive vehicle on the screen. And I was hoping that was just going to be due to a battery issue, but now that the battery is fully charged up, that has not gone away, and we have no power steering. Now, to those who are not familiar with this platform, these cars have an electric power steering rack, meaning that there isn't a power steering fluid pump, there's no power steering fluid, period. It's all electrically activated and assisted. Meaning that I'm very concerned about the fact that we have no power steering because I see no reasons why we would have no power steering. There is some suspension damage, but it's not enough to cause power steering issues. Nevertheless, that is part of our hidden damage. I don't know if you guys can see this very well on camera, but currently that wheel is perfectly straight, the steering wheel is perfectly straight, but this wheel here definitely has a bit of an angle to it, as well as some camber that is not supposed to be there. However, that does bring us to one of the good things about this car, and it's the modifications. Besides the dual pulley upgrade and the ultracharger that initially caught my attention to this car, on Copart, there's also some suspension modifications, more specifically the upper control arms. I definitely know that those are not stock, and I believe those are 034 upper control arms, which are adjustable, and that allows you to adjust your camber if the car is lowered to the point that you have camber wear issues on your tires. There is still some hope that our electric steering issue will go away after clearing the codes. However, I can't promise that. So we're gonna try that a little later in this video. The fact that the steering doesn't work at all makes me think there is probably a mechanical problem. However, you never know. Electrical issues sometimes just need a little reset. If you're new here, my plan is to buy a parts car. And I think the parts car is going to be an A4. The reason for that is the fact that A4s come in the same colors. They actually have the completely same body. They just have different motor, transmission, suspension, stuff like that. And also they just go for so much cheaper on Copart. And on Copart you can find them with most likely timing chain issues, because I've noticed a lot of mechanical damage totaled cars, and I can't think of anything that would cause the mechanical totaling if it wasn't a catastrophic engine damage. But anyway, we're gonna take things one step at a time and fix our pulley issues so that we can actually have some cooling. Because the supercharger belt does drive our water pump right here, we also have no radiator, which I did buy, but hopefully after today we'll have coolant or at least distilled water in the system to allow me to actually drive this car, or at least keep it running for a little longer than I have been with no coolant. So first I'm going to take the tension off of the the tensioner for the accessory belt so that we can remove it. There we go. Just enough to be able to remove this pulley here. Now of course we need a triple square. Probably could have gotten away by reusing this, but I didn't want to. Next, let's remove this tensioner with, you guessed it, a triple square. There we go. Actually, we do not want to forget this little cap. Make it nice and cute. Reinstall our water pump pulley. Let's see if I can guess how it's supposed to be routed. That looks about right. All right, I think this is good. I guess the trick is to just do this pulley less because it's smooth, and you have to get over this little ridge. And slowly and carefully release the tension. All right, now that we have our coolant, we can try and install this radiator that came from a junkyard 3.2 Audi A6. It looks like all of the hose receptacles are the same. The only difference is that that car was an automatic, so it has a transmission cooler right here, which we're just gonna keep unplugged. I don't think it's gonna bother us. I don't think this is gonna be a permanent or long-term solution. This is just something for me to mount to the car so that I can actually fill it up with water, install my heat exchanger, and have the car be more or less drivable without blowing the motor if I let it run for too long. Now here we also have a heat exchanger. So this is a pretty instrumental part to modifying these cars. If you were to upgrade the pulleys, they do end up getting pretty heat soaked, and this is a very common modification to the 3.0 supercharged motor. Problem is that obviously this thing is a little crooked, it's a little damaged, but the more I look at it, the more I'm convinced that there's zero leaks out of this thing. So technically, it's still more or less functional. It's still gonna do a decent job at cooling. It's still going to do what it's supposed to do. And it will most likely end up replacing this down the road, but until then, I kind of just want to see if we can get this thing to work. In fact, Jose from Merc Racing, which is a brand I've been familiar with for quite a while because I'm relatively familiar with this platform, he reached out and offered one of their heat exchangers, a sponsorship deal, more or less. And I said, I'm down, but I think he might have one too many DMs, and he never opened my response. So Jose, if you're watching this, I am waiting for you to text me back. Or maybe he saw that I don't really have that many followers and I'm probably not worth sponsoring, but you know, I have no idea. So while we're waiting for that to get figured out, we're gonna install this bad boy and hope that we don't leak too much distilled water. So I removed the condenser.
and the heat exchanger mounting brackets in order to make myself a little more space. Now I can sort of fish in the radiator, connect our hoses.
This guy, we might have to plug this guy because I think that's a difference between the 3.2 and the 3.0T radiator. I think there's supposed to be a little nipple that this connects to.
Now it's time to slide in our condenser right in front of the radiator.
Oh, perfect. Oh yeah. Slide on our heat exchanger hoses. Theoretically, our coolant system is still not sealed because I need to cap this. I think one of these little caps will work well. Its size. Oh, perfect. I wonder if we can just... We sure can. Probably a terrible idea. Get in there. All right, now let's try and secure this. Yes, bungee cords. One more for a little extra measure. I do not think we have any more disconnected hoses. All we need is just some distilled water and to tuck this out of the way somewhere. I'm still pretty upset about this harness being ripped out like this. I'm almost positive that this wasn't caused by an accident. I'm pretty sure somebody, probably a transporter, didn't feel like dealing with the headlight dangling, which obviously wasn't secured anymore, and they just ripped it out. They didn't feel like disconnecting the plug. They just thought that ripping it out would be the most efficient way of getting rid of that, and that bothers me a lot. Because a bunch of this wiring is hot and exposed, there's a solid chance that this is going to touch some metal or anything grounded that will let the current flow through it, and that could cause blown fuses, that could cause blown control modules, and we definitely don't want that. So I'm going to cut off anything that I see with exposed copper. Okay, I think this car is practically drivable. I mean, there's one more issue with the motor that is not going to work properly, and that is our secondary air injection system. So right here, there's a plastic hose leading out of, I don't know, probably intake manifold, and it's supposed to lead all the way to here where we're supposed to have a secondary air injection pump mounted. This is the wiring for it. As you can see, I did tape off the positive cable for it for the same reason I had to cut this, so that we don't have a hot wire dangling around, potentially touching stuff that it should not be touching. We have this wide open pipe here, and I should probably plug that as well. Just gonna slide this cap on, and it's probably not gonna be a perfect seal, but I think it's gonna make things a little better. All right, at this point, let's fill up our coolant with water and read the codes, find out what's going on with our steering rack. All right, let's find out if we have any leaks. That was a perfect pour, by the way. Okay, so I do see some water dripping, and that is most likely coming out of our heat exchanger. So my hopes of this thing being a little more usable are now over. You guys see this tiny little line on the channel? I believe that's where it's leaking from. It's crazy that it's leaking from this and not like one of these super messed up channels here. Just this tiny little crack in the corner. All this distilled water cost me like $6, so we can spare some distilled water. Steering defective, do not drive. I wonder why we have an airbag light. Kind of odd. Parking brake malfunction. That could just be dead battery because the parking brake seems to work pretty well. Tire pressure also could be dead battery, but we did have a flat tire. That makes sense, we have no headlights. Washer fluid also is empty. Okay, is that all? Right. Every single bulb in the front is not going to be working. It's okay, baby. You got this. But all of our pulleys seem to be working pretty well. I did just realize that I did not bring my code reader. It is in my tour rig. So we're gonna try using VCDS, which might be complicated. We'll see. Okay, looks like we have our port. We'll start with the motor. Of course. Guess I'm gonna have to go home and get my other code reader. I'm mainly concerned about our steering rack. So the check engine light is most likely just our secondary air injection. A bunch of bulbs, power steering control module, no signal. We might as well scan everything. We have 64 faults, and that's after me erasing a few different components. And We're just gonna clear everything. So the stuff that persisted, I don't know, we need to look at the airbags because we already know what's going on with that. Steering assistance, that's what's important to us. So we have a control module faulty code, and that is very odd. I don't know what that has to do with. All right, what can we see? So first of all, there was this fluid here that scared me, made me think that we have a leak out of the transmission, but looks like that was just coming out of our exhaust, just the condensation inside the exhaust, because the clamps did hit the ground pretty hard. By the way, to those who haven't seen the first video on this car, it did crash into a tree. We know that. We are in contact with the previous owner. The evidence of said tree in places like this. And by the way, yes, it is a Miltac exhaust. As we can see right here. Come on. There we go. I'm actually a little surprised by how quiet this car is after looking at this exhaust. I definitely thought there would be at least mufflers, but maybe we just didn't rev it hard enough. Okay, no damages in the rear. And yes, we do have a sport differential, which I can tell just by looking at these plugs. So that is awesome. So everything back here looks pretty good. Looks like all of our damage was just up front. There's more tree. We were missing one of these covers on this side. This control arm looks straight, but it definitely did take some damage. And there goes our steering rack. So one thing I know about these steering racks is that it's a little common for them to get water damaged, and probably because they're so low to the ground. And if people go through deep water, there's probably water getting into these connections. I mean, just looking at this, it doesn't look to be bent. I don't know why we would have the control module faulty problem. Here we have an aftermarket cross brace, which is good. Tightens up the front end a little bit. This would be a good time to go over the modifications that I know this car has, because the previous owner did send me the mod list. Obviously, the most important ones we already saw. The car does have an APR ultracharger as well as dual pulleys. Probably has stock cats, or so it appears anyway. Which kind of sucks because, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but I know that on cars that are tuned beyond stage 1, it is best to get rid of your stock catalytic converters because they can and probably will eventually melt and give you problems. If this car is not tuned for pops and bangs, I'm not too worried about the cats, but it's still something to consider because that could be a problem and cause issues down the road. But yes, we do have a very nice, very expensive Miltac catback, which is awesome. There's also some suspension modifications in the back. Right here, we have a 034 Motorsports rear sway bar as well as sway bar end links. Rear sway bars do make a significant difference on these cars. Audis are infamous for having understeer issues, and these rear sway bars, I believe, help with that significantly. Most of my S4s and A4s have had rear sway bars upgraded, like that B8.5 S4 out there, which is for sale. So if anybody is interested, please reach out to me in my Instagram that you can find in my YouTube bio. One really cool modification that is worth a lot of money and is kind of hiding in here is the clutch. Based on the information that Sam, the previous owner, has sent me, this car has a stage 3 South Bend clutch that is rated for 750 horsepower, which is awesome. Cannot wait to drive it. But I can't really drive it with no power steering. I mean, I could try, but I feel like it would be pretty hard to steer without that. And I definitely do not want to cause any more issues by doing so. So we gotta try and figure out what's going on with this thing. Let's see if we can unplug these connections and plug them back in. I don't know, it works with computers, right? So maybe that'll do something with here. Another thing I have not been able to figure out is what's causing our excessive camber on this wheel. Obviously, we definitely have some sort of suspension damage. I just don't know what it is yet. As you can see, this wheel did have a hard impact with the said tree. Remains of it are actually wedged between the tire and the rim. And I don't see any bends here. This looks pretty good. Obviously, we are a little scratched down here, but it is very straight, which it should be. There you can see our aftermarket control arms. They're probably 034 Motorsports upper control arms, which are adjustable, which is great. But if you take a close look at that bend here and then compare it to the bend here, I don't think they look the same. I think this one is a lot less bent. So most likely our upper control arms got significantly damaged. If anybody from 034 is watching this, hey, reach out to me because I need one side upper control arm.
So I decided to start unplugging the connections for the steering rack as well as cleaning them with electrical parts cleaner just to be safe.
I see no visible issues with the steering rack, so I can't figure out what's wrong with it. I wonder if somehow the accident caused it to fail. And maybe the tie rod getting pulled or pushed into the steering rack somehow caused the internal damage.
There was one more thing I wanted to try using the scanner OBD11, which was resetting, doing some sort of a factory reset of the steering rack. I read on the forums that that was an option, and I tried that, and for some, I couldn't get it to work. There's nothing I could do in the software that was letting me actually reset it. I probably just wasn't following the correct procedure because I don't know what the procedure is, but long story short is that it just didn't work. And with that terrible disappointment, I am out of time for this week's video. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.